investigation 3.1, we actually get to use some new materials for this lab, mainly the rubber band, the launcher here. You will be using the steel marbles. I like I'll give you a couple strategies with those guys. And then, of course, we're using the rest of the energy car track. There's actually two setups in this lab. So students will be using this setup here, and then they'll be using the physics stand as well. That might work across 2 days, so you can have them set up, but it is a pretty short lab, and the idea is to compare launching versus gravity. So if you can get this done in 1 day and your students are able to switch it, that'd be awesome. So the new materials, the marbles, I like to keep the marbles. Let's see, is that even in camera? I like to keep the marbles. Now, can you see it? Just about. Yeah, there's a little holder here. I like to keep those there. This is also really useful for as we're cleaning up the lab and then you go check off each lab station. I should see my 3 marbles here. You don't want those guys walking off. In the event that you are short marbles, as most teachers are. Anyways, I do have more marbles about this size, so I can always bring some over. Another piece that's very useful is this guy right here. This is actually a magnet that's supposed to sit on top of the car as a way to keep the marbles from flying out. I do find that sometimes it interacts with your stopper in a bad way, so it's not something to leave on the car. I think you're supposed to actually put it on the bottom, but I found that sometimes that causes a bit of drag. See, that's stopping my car. So it doesn't work exactly as it should, but I always keep at least one of these handies in my pocket because marbles tend to go flying everywhere anytime that you use them. So this is just a quick way for me to pick them up and plop them where they're supposed to be. So I keep one handy so that I can navigate that throughout the whole day. Okay. The other thing, we're using this launcher here, which uses a rubber band. And the way that you want to set these up, it's going to go right here on these little orange guys, and these guys can loosen and tight. You're going to try to get it on the silver part between the washer and the orange. So if you loosen them up a bit, you'll see that silver part of it. So you're going to thread it through one side. You want to make an X pattern, so you're going to twist once, so that way there is an X. I don't know if that's coming in on camera, but I've twisted it once so that way it crisscrosses somewhere in the middle. And then you can tighten it so that the rubber band's not going anywhere. And there you go. I actually pulled my rubber bands a little bit, so don't go too hard on that, but your cross should be there in the middle. This is another, in a lot of labs assign students different roles because there's certain skills that come with different roles, like getting the car out of the bottom of the track. One of the other skills is using this launcher, because if you use it wrong, these cars go flying off your track. So what I found is a good method is you got your launcher here, and it does have this stopper here on the back. Make sure you talk to your students that what the purpose of that is for is that you're pulling it back to the same distance every time. And so I've set mine back to about 2 centimeters behind. Well, I put mine, it's maybe about 2.5 centimeters behind the rubber band, 3.5. But just don't let them change that throughout, because what you'll do is you'll pull the car all the way back until it hits that, so that way you can be consistent with your launches. That's the purpose. I found the best way to launch is if I rest my hand on the launcher and I grab one of these lips on the front of the car, so that way when I pull back, I can kind of see, I told you it takes practice. As I pull back, I can let go like that, and that worked perfectly. Your finger's trying to come right off of it without pulling it up, and then you get a pretty good launch. This is definitely one of those labs where, guess what, marbles are gonna go flying, because once you've loaded up marbles with this and you have a mishap of a launch, that's okay. Just be patient. It's a short lab and you'll be fine. The first part of the lab sets it up like this. You'll need a scale so they can get the mass of the car with no marbles, 1 marble, 2, and 3. If your scale, sometimes these scales don't go up very high. If it doesn't go up high enough to measure all 3, you could just get the mass of the car, mass of the marble, and the students can do math to figure out the total mass for each of the launches. What they should find for this first part is as you increase the mass, but your force is staying the same, you're gonna get slower and slower speeds measured out on your CPO timer mode. And they will have to do conversion. If you look at the chart, mass of the car, that's done with the scale. You have 4, so empty, 1, 2, 3. Time through the Photogate, that's being collected here, right there. And then they'll have to calculate the speed. And what they should see is my speed decreases as I add more mass. Second part of the lab, and I'm not gonna go ahead and set this up. You just take off the plunger and you're hooking up to the stand, so gravity is now your force, and you're doing the same thing, measuring 1, 2, and 3 and no mass. Notice they only gave you 3 lines for this one, so maybe tell your students to add a 4th spot and squeeze it down there, because you want all 4 of those trials. What they should find for this one is, you would think, well, similar enough, you add mass, it makes it slower, but actually increasing the mass increases the gravitational force, so the speed is actually consistent all the way throughout. Make sure you move this guy down to the end for when you are doing your gravity one. And then you just got some questions. So 2 setups, but it's not complicated. The point of the lab is to compare the force of this changing the mass. You should get a lower acceleration, so smaller velocity, versus gravity, where changing mass does not affect the velocity because it's increasing that force of gravity. So you end up with the same acceleration, same speed, no matter the mass. All right, that was investigation 3.1.